What's up, marketing legends, and welcome to another episode of the Growth Colony podcast. I'm producer Liza from X-Growth to tell you that each episode we bring in B2B leaders to chat about how you can achieve those everyday wins in the marketing world. Whether you're new to the B2B game, working at a leadership level, or even just showing some interest, we know you'll love the episode. So wherever you are, get comfy and enjoy the show.
Right, here we go, everyone. Nice to see you. I'm Vinnie. This is with me is Shahin. We're both from Growth Colony Podcast, and super excited today. We've got Mr. Mark Ritson with us.
Hello team.
Nice to see you, Mark. You well?
Yeah, it's a beautiful day in Tasmania. Everything's lovely here, so we're enjoying the very warm autumn we're having.
Beautiful. I wish I could say the same. I've just moved to the sunny coast, and Alfred is on its way.
Yeah, it's true. My nanny was having a holiday in Brizzy, and I sort of said to her, "You should come home early." And she's like, "No, I'm having a good time." And I said, "No, it's a flight. You should come home now." You know what I mean?
Yes.
It's looking serious, right?
Yeah. So we'll see. But I was keen to get this episode recorded and live. So. Mark, cheers for joining us. Really appreciate it. We have guests on here. Growth Colony is all about, our audience is mid-level to senior marketers in B2B mainly. Technology takes a lot of that percentage, technology marketers, but marketers as a whole. And we like to bring on guests that have a point of view, essentially, on how we can help those marketers feel better about where they are, understand things that have happened in the past to our guests, both good and bad, and sort of apply those lessons and learnings to their own paths and journeys. And we've got you on because, well, you are who you are, and I'm sure that whatever you say can be seen as helpful. Where do we want to start, chaps? Shahin, do you want to jump in with where you wanted to start on some of the journey?
Well, I mean, I've been following your journey for a long time, Mark, and as I said earlier, big fan. And I was attending, a course that you had for, I think it was ADMA during COVID. COVID had just hit, and it was a weird time. And I was thinking about you were obviously going through the 12 weeks, which was fascinating. And for anybody who has not signed up for the Mini MBA, please do so. But one of the things that was on my mind when we were doing this is, what is your journey like going to a business owner? I mean, my first question is, what happened? You've been kind of consulting for some of the largest brands out there. You've been in the academia and in some of the amazing business schools. What happened that you said, "Screw it, I'm going to go on my own and going to do this thing on my own"?
Well, look, two things I think. Children, first of all. So I've been married 20 years to the same woman. Bonus points. But we put off having kids because my life and her life was very much, in a not exciting way, global. So I did 2 to 3 weeks a month on planes. I was based out of Australia for the last 2 decades, but there wasn't a lot of work here of the kind that I did. So I kept my contacts in Europe and in the US. And so I spent my life on an A380, which was fine. I had no problem with it. It's just, it wasn't commensurate with having kids. And at some point, my wife pointed out we were getting almost too old to have them, and we couldn't wait any longer. So the consulting had to go, and it was, that was my income. I mean, you can live on the, whatever it was, 95 grand you get paid Australian for being a professor, but I certainly got used to not living on that and living on a lot more money from consulting. So it started out with a very specific problem, which was, how do I make relatively large amounts of money without leaving Tasmania? And that was a strategic problem. So I spent literally about a year. I've got lots of dogs, walking around, various fields with my dogs. And that's all I thought about for about a year. And I'm very proud of Mini MBA for lots of reasons. But one of them is, it really was a strategic creation. Becoming a marketing professor was gravity. It's what happens if you like marketing. And same with being a consultant. People start offering you money to come and help them if you're a marketing professor. But the Mini MBA was a proper strategic round block to fit a round hole. You know what I mean? And I really thought about a lot of options before I got to it. And I really used the strategic process to work it out. So partly it was kids. And then the other reason was I was growing, a lesser reason, but I was growing more and more aware that marketers were probably getting worse in terms of their knowledge. And at the same time, business schools weren't necessarily filling that gap any better than they used to. So the whole thing kind of turned into Mini MBA over a period of about a year.
Yeah, interesting. I asked this question because when I was attending your class, one of the things that you constantly said is how disadvantaged small businesses are.
Oh yeah.
How you crushed a lot of dreams. I feel like if there are any business owners there, you go and say it's just there's no way, there's no chance. The chance is so slim.
No, from a marketing and brand point of view, Shahin, it's very important. The Americans have a lot to answer for in this area because they're very David versus Goliath and, small and agile and entrepreneurial and all that. It's all great on paper, but when you actually look at the evidence, never mind being a small company with small resources, that's one thing. But just being a small brand is the biggest impediment to success you'll ever face. And by reverse logic, being a large brand, is an enormous catalyst to success. And once, the secret of branding success, if there is such a thing, is get big any which way, usually by being there first. And then you've got to be really dumb to blow it from there. So yeah, I'm very keen on letting small investors, founders, entrepreneurs realize that the odds are incredibly against them. And in the metaphor of David versus Goliath, David doesn't win. Goliath beats the shit out of David easily and just gets on with his day. You know what I mean? And that's not negative. It's realistic. And what it leads to then is kind of a strategic coda of, so what can I do then as an entrepreneur, small business, to give myself any chance at all? Because if I listen to too many of the American experts, we're going to be agile and awesome and entrepreneurial, and all of that sucks in reality. So you begin then to tease open. So what can you do as a smaller brand? And there are some things, the odds are still heavily there's some different ways to play the game, basically.
If I can get one more question, Vinny, I know you got a lot of burning questions. I want to just get one question on the back of that is, and I think it will tie into what you want to discuss as well. How did you approach this, Mark, in terms of you're like, okay, I'm at a disadvantage in terms of growing this brand to, get it to where I want it to get. So I'm in Tasmania, sitting back, enjoying a nice glass of whiskey and not worrying about flying out all the time. Love to hear your approach in terms of, okay, this is kind of what I did or kind of the strategic moves that you did so that you're at least less at that disadvantage.
Yeah, there's a couple of things, right? So I took a couple of enemies, right? So one of the things you can do as a smaller brand is you can position against the bigger brands. So I positioned against business schools and I positioned against traditional MBAs in a sort of friendly way, but pointing out they were too expensive. I mean, if you look at how I positioned Mini MBA from the name onwards, it was, I'll get you an MBA level training in marketing without $100,000 in 2 years. You know what I mean? I was bouncing off something. So that was very, very explicitly in my mind from the start. The other thing was I'm very influenced by the core competence literature of Prahalad and Hamill all the way back. So I know I have no competence in a lot of things. And if we summarize that literature down to a couple of things, work out what you're really not good at and outsource it to other players, right? And stay with what you're good at. So I knew straight away I am no leadership interest, or I do not want to lead anyone at any point, even my own kids, right? I'm not a leadership guy. I'm a sole operator. I don't care about being in charge of stuff. I just want to be my own guy. So I have no organizational skills, really, So I partnered up with the publishers of Marketing Week, Centaur, and gave them half the profits because I knew I needed someone that could do payroll, structure, planning, and all of that. And I really did give away tens of millions of dollars to the point where some of my friends go, you're crazy. You gave all that money away. But I didn't, because I couldn't have done it without that competence. You know what I mean? I needed, it turned out Centaur had a few really strong skills and, online platforms, HR, they did all right by me, in the long run, although it's cost me a huge amount of money as well. So that was a big part of it, and no regrets there either. And I think they were the two cognizant choices I made. Focus on what I'm good at and outsource everything else, but with positioning, really position on that. The last one I would add is I've done a lot of work on pricing for clients. So, again, summarizing it down to a nutshell, what most entrepreneurs get wrong is they just fuck up pricing, right? So if you wanted to summarize 20 years of experience, it's all about profit. It's not about revenue. That's not an obvious thing for most people. If it's all about profit, then pricing is what drives profit, not sales, not keeping costs down. There's lots of literature on this. You want a premium price. To get a premium price, you need differentiation. Salience is great, but it doesn't give you fucking differentiation, which doesn't give you price premium. How Brands Grow Without Price Premium is a very interesting book that Professor Sharp wrote. And so if you follow all that down, it comes back to absolutely no discounts at any point in time and a heavy focus on differentiation at the beginning, which was very, very cognizant of what I was doing, So that was a big part of it too. And I'd been trained by a lot of very interesting part of this. So I'd been consulting with big brands for 20 years. So take Hennessy as a good example. Did a lot of work for Hennessy Cognac in France. What I did not realize as I was dispensing knowledge and guidance on branding was I was also absorbing unconsciously how these brilliant business people did business. I learned a lot on pricing and margin from Hennessy, from Gilles Hennessy down. Those boys knew what they were doing. So having gone around all these companies for all these years at a very senior level, I unconsciously absorbed a lot of other stuff that became apparent to me when I had to do it myself. That was very interesting too. But yeah, for me, price was, we had a couple of moments right at the start where some numpty was offering an early bird special on Mini MBA, and I dismembered them and deliberately so, not because I enjoyed doing that, but because everyone in the operation needed to understand that the penalty for doing that was corporate death. You discount my product, especially without telling me, it's over. Because it's like killing a baby before it even gets a chance to be born. Early bird specials and all that amateur shit. 20% off and all that fuck. No way. I wasn't going to embarrass myself with that. So, and it's a battle I've had to keep fighting a little bit. Do you know what I mean? But I know what sales promotions do to companies and margins and brands. And, I'd rather have gone out of business through not having enough people on the course than going out of business because I was all these doing fucking online courses with their, you see, I mean, all these, what's the search guy?
Black Friday
stuff. But what's the famous search guy? What's he called?
Patel.
Neil Patel's doing all these courses in like how to do marketing, and he opens, his opening gambit is 50% off. And I'm like, so first of all, Mr. Pennell, you know nothing about marketing from the first bullet point of your course. This is not someone that you should learn from. Do you know what I mean? You've just shot yourself in the head with the very first motion of your approach. You know what I mean? So yeah, I really was hot. I was hot on that.
I was really wondering if we're gonna go after Simon Sinek first or somebody else, but it seems like it wasn't.
Who would you like? I mean, we can go through them if you want. I mean, look. First of all, they're all very decent human beings, right? I just don't rate some of them as highly as others as marketing people. Do you know what I mean? That's fair. I'm sure they don't think I'm that good a marketer either. I'm sure they love their kids and do a good, do nice things. But my dad's a great fellow. I wouldn't put him in charge of training marketers. You know what I'm saying?
I love it.
This is an interesting point to then have a think about. Talking about things such as pricing and not discounting and straight off the bat, you don't want to be doing stuff like that, right? I wonder, is everything that we've spoken about thus far thought through the lens of, traditional B2C, but also B2B marketing in your opinion?
Yeah, look, we when we started, we kind of went by default B2C, right? So the first 2 years, we were just doing a straight subscription play to marketers to sign up through the website.
To individuals?
Just to individuals, straight individuals. And then we brought on Matt Smith, who now runs development for me, but was my lone sales guy at the start. And of course, the other part with all this is serendipity, right? I learned it from working with brands. When you study their histories to work out not just what is the DNA of this brand, but why is it like that? A lot of it are these moments of absolute and utter randomness that in the early gestation of a brand send it one way and not another. And certainly getting Matt, who has a very advanced and particular approach to business sales early, really swung us in a certain way into B2B. So he really takes a lot of credit for how he then recruited the sales team, ran the sales team. We don't do, for example, this is entirely down to Matt, we don't do individual bonuses based on salesperson performance. It's a team thing because Matt wouldn't have it any other way. And that is quite unusual, right? But that's how Matt does it. And so he really takes a lot of invisible credit for how the B2B thing developed, which is now, I would say, it would be 75% of our sales this year will be B2B.
That was going to be my next question. What's working more? So if the B2B approach is, I'd imagine you're getting a lot more mass that way anyway, just in one sale.
Yeah. What happens with B2B, of course, is that it becomes an annuity in the sense that we've got 25 banker global clients who outsource us for their training, right, for their marketers. So every year, we've got companies that we've trained every marketer in the company. They're still churning 30% of them. So every year we get 300 sent to us to go through the course, right? You can't beat that with B2C. Yeah. Like we're doing a big push into certain countries now, B2C. And that's partly to set up B2B later, right? But B2B, when you get it right, has that annuity that keeps turning. You know what I mean?
100%.
That you just can't beat. You can't beat it.
100%. It's a good way to start is by talking directly to the individuals, but it also is a good thought process to keep happening because it can, fill some holes along the way. But ultimately, when you get to that point where you're going from a pure B2C play to then having a B2B play as well as B2C, you're kind of capturing. How does B2B is notoriously known for longer sales cycles. There are more people involved in the decision-making process. The cost of sale isn't necessarily higher. It just depends on how many people join the course, right? So those are the three differentiating things between B2B and B2C. What's my question? My question is, how are you finding, are you finding that there are longer sales cycles, that there are more decision makers in there? Yeah,
you're absolutely right. So there's no real CAC for B2B. Well, there's CAC for B2B, but it really doesn't capture the true CAC. Do you know what I mean? CAC for B2C, you can do a pretty good estimate on it. It's much more difficult to assess for B2B. Yeah, longer sales cycles. I think with us, because we run 2 courses a year, right? We recruit for April and September. With B2C, we're just, we have when someone expresses any kind of interest, we're now pushing them towards April. And that's what we do. With B2B, we just don't do that, right? We know it's a longer sell. And with many clients, we run a special run of the course just for their people, right? So I feel that longer cycle, that's true. I'm very influenced by the 95-5 rule, which is partly influenced by my house, right? You know this story, right? 95-5 rule partly comes out of my house. So the discovery of it is absolutely down to John Dawes and Ehrenberg. But that's to get pissed off if you ever say that it isn't. But it's really down to Pete Weinberg and John Lombardo, who both came to my house, got hammered, and then one of them went out to Adelaide, worked with John, and came away with the 95-5 rule with a massive hangover. That's all they could remember. And 95-5...
They're the ex-LinkedIn gents who started the B2B Institute.
Yeah. They're the best B2B marketers I know. And they were the guys that went... I mean, again, John Dawes found it, but it's John Lombardo who went, hang on, what? Say that again? And the point is, the 95-5 rule, which has applications to B2C, sure. But in B2B, the 95-5 rule solves most of our problems, right? It explains the long of it. It explains category entry points. It explains longer sales cycles. And it should tell you what to do, right? We're always on with Mini MBA to every company, to every marketing excellence CMO person. And we're not pushing them to sign up tomorrow because it's pathetic, right? We're going to rely on the fact that every year, 5% of those decision makers, approximately, are going to go either my CMO has told me to improve marketing, or the CEO is like, what the fuck is the problem with marketing? Or we've got money to improve marketing, blah, blah, or I'm a new marketing head, or whatever the category entry points are. When that happens, we're already there as the best training for marketing in the world, and much
Top of
less
mind.
expensive
Yeah.
than much less good programs, right? That's my
Yeah.
job. And once we do that, we just find there's enough people ringing us and ringing Matt each year that we can handle the 5% when they come in. And that is a big part of B2B, which we sort of do in B2C, but we're more directional with B2C. Whereas with B2B, we're not driving, a CMO to put 25 people through the program in April. What we're doing is going, we're the best training in marketing in the world. And when you need us, we'd love to talk to you. That's it, and we're always driving that salience all the time.
Yeah. And a couple of things that come to mind there. So first thing, just to sort of define what it is that you're talking about there, the 95-5 rule is effectively 95% of your market are not even in market ready to buy at the moment, but they are your typical type of audience set.
They are your market, Vinny. I mean, I use haircuts as an example, right?
Yeah.
If you look at 100 men, let's do men walking around at any one point in time, 5% of them are in that 2-3 day period where they're like, fuck, I got to get my hair cut because I've got an interview or a date, or it's just getting too long, or my wife's
or an interview with Mark Ritson.
Or interview with Mark Ritson. Yeah, absolutely right. Yeah. And they're looking, if you ran a thing saying, hey, haircuts today, 50% off, or best haircuts in wherever, they would
get
be
your ball chopped off by Mark Ritson because you can't discount anything. Yeah.
But the other 95%, the point is they don't give a fuck about a haircut because they've had a haircut recently.
Of course.
What you should be doing is just still reaching them, because the time to tell them you're the best haircut in town is not when they're looking for a haircut. There's 19 times more of them, and you're predisposing them to your brand and what you stand for before they come into category naturally. And that's in B2B the game,
I feel like I'm always in the 5%.
You are. Yeah, listen, I know. Listen, first of all, most male hairdressers are slightly bald. And second, I sit next to more bald guys than I do hairy guys in hairdressing salons. I got to tell you, they're obsessed. That side bit there, they're obsessed with it, right? They are, man. I'm telling you. Have you ever seen the guy? They're always there. You must be always in there, Shane.
I got tons of shavers that are designed for a specific type of cuts. You wouldn't believe. When COVID hit, I bought my clippers, to do my own hair, because we're in it was very hard. And it sort of looked good front on, but only later on in photographs did you realize at the back it was just like fucking chaos. You know what I mean?
Mullet.
That's good. Imagine
was,
when you miss a line in the back like this, and that happens. That happens. I go downstairs and my wife is like, I think you want to go back to the bathroom.
That's right. Helpful.
But I was Vinny, I was gonna touch on personal branding. And Mark, I'm really interested to hear your thoughts on this. And you might say I'm wrong, but I feel like you have a lot of the success of Mini MBA in the early days was on the back of your personal brand and who you were.
Yeah,
I'm very keen to get your thoughts on that. Now there are a lot of people who talk about personal branding. It's very important, and I know this is something dear to Vinny as well, and Vinny does a lot of work on that front. Very keen to get your thoughts on personal branding as a channel to drive growth. Maybe in this case specifically for yourself.
Yeah, look, it happened to me about, maybe 20 years ago. I've written about it. I did an event with Gary Hamel, the famous strategy professor at LBS, and Gary wasn't even there for the talk that we did for the LBS alumni. And I'd spent weeks getting my talk ready, and he just basically beamed his chat in from California, and he didn't even have any preparation. He just talked shit for 25 minutes about strategy from his kitchen, and then that was it. But the effect on the audience was, I was chopped liver and he was Lady Gaga. And I was like, how is that possible that he had no content, didn't really give a fuck, didn't even bother turning up, but everyone was blown away. And I realized it was because they were here to see Gary Hamel be Gary Hamel. And I was some branding professor that, that's nice, So it really taught me a harsh lesson, which is I needed to get into the place where people were coming to see me be me, i.e. a brand, rather than a commodity professor talking about generic stuff. And so that started it's very important. I mean, I did think about this a lot of the time. It was very important that I didn't then create some phony fucking personality that wasn't me. There's that very nice chap with the Mohican in Singapore that does like fucking personal branding, whatever he's called. And it's clear that he's just grown that Mohican to have something different, and you can smell it. It's the inauthenticity is palpable, right? So it was very important to me when I looked at it compared to brand work that although I was going to absolutely position myself with differentiation, unlike brands, I wasn't going to change the company's C. So when you work on a big brand, you do a 3C's analysis with lots of data, and you look at what the customer wants, who's the competitor, and what do we have. And in some cases, absolutely, we change the company offer. We do it all the time with Mini MBA to make it more convenient. We strip things back and blah, blah, blah. In this case, I was determined not to touch the company C because it's bullshit when you do that. It's fake, and smart people can smell it, right? So what I did was lock that down and say, right, this is who I am. I'm northern, working class, relatively bullshit-free, person. Let's stop trying to be like every other marketing professor and do generic marketing professor talks, and let's just be more me, because there's room for that in the market and consumers want it. And also, it's the only shot I've got. I think that's the difference with personal branding. You can't fake it. I think 99 times out of 100, when people go through that process, nobody cares because it's not that interesting. Do you know what I mean? And there's not a lot you can do about it. And this is a tricky thing, right? So, yeah, I went hard at that point, and I sort of got famous within my business school, but that was it. And then I was very conscious 10 years ago, 15 years ago, that the game itself was changing. That when we were young PhD students, you wanted to get to Wharton or Harvard because the corporate brand was what made you famous. It was clear that professors now were becoming more, famous than the teams, that Shaq was more important than the Lakers, and that game was changing fast because of the changes in technology. So I knew at that point that there was an opportunity to surpass the business school and be my own boss. And most importantly, because it's all about money, make much more money. The only way to make money in marketing is if you're getting all of it and not being paid a salary, right? So that was a key point.
Gonna make that a clip. But Vinny, I'm sure you got a lot of questions on this one.
Yeah, look, Mark, you gave a lecture last year on brand with British Brands Group.
Yeah.
We have both watched a plethora of your stuff, but this in particular, I sat and watched and hung on every sentence. I thought it was fantastic. I want to get back to the personal branding, but I think it's pertinent of me to sort of come back to an original point that you first made. You were going through the history of marketing, where it all started. And I think you were talking specifically about brand management or brand as a whole. And the first managed brand came from a gentleman by the name of Scaurus.
Yeah, that's right.
Out of Pompeii in Italy. Pompeii being
the first one we know about, really. You know what I mean? The first one you can really sort of pinpoint, yeah.
Yeah. And it was a fish sauce, right? A fish sauce, which it was managed because it was able to not only be advertised, but he was able to build 7 shops out of it, or he was advertising to 7 shops or multiple shops. But the whole definition of the word brand in that instance, in the very first documented managed brand, was that this fish sauce was the only fish sauce that wasn't going to kill you.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, you're right. And we talked about that during the lecture, right? I mean, brand basically means fire, right? It means burning the mark of the founder onto something. And the case I was making in that lecture, which I'm pretty sure of, I can't prove, is that brands for the first millennia or two derive most of their equity from, I know this one from the Scaurus name, in a world of no health standards and fuck knows what goes on in ingredients, this one is less likely to kill me because they have more to lose if they kill me than a generic fish sauce, right? And I think that's probably the origin of most brand equity until, post Middle Ages.
And so from that, right, the word brand, it originates from branding something, making your mark.
Brandia, the Norse word for fire, brandia.
Norse word for fire, correct. Would you say, or would you agree with me that when I say that the term brand has ultimately, because effectively what you're doing with a brandia is creating a logo, right, and stamping your mark. And nowadays, the term brand is so much more than just a logo. You can create a logo overnight, but it doesn't mean that you have a name for yourself, because the market is so saturated that anyone can go out and create a logo with the tools, that you're not going to really have too much of a reputation. So I like to think that brand is now, in a more modern day, another word for reputation. Is that something that you can get on board with?
No, definitely not, Vinny. So you're making a good case, but it's flawed there in the idea that brand is logo, right? It was never logo, right? In the case of Scaurus, brand has always only existed in the mind of the target consumer, right? Now, logo was one way to get to that, as was the product, as was the price, as was the presence. But ultimately, the great paradox of branding from the start is that brand only exists in the consumer's head, yeah? And
as a reputation.
Their eyes, yeah, but reputation is a relatively weak shard of a much broader concept, right? So, okay, what's the reputation? Reputation doesn't cover salience. It doesn't cover various aspects of brand perception separate from reputation that relate more to product performance and symbolism.
Yeah.
It's too micro a concept, right? So reputation's good. But it's not, PR. The PR industry pushed it for sort of 30 years that it's all about corporate reputation. It isn't. I mean, if you look at what we now know about brand, putting a bullshit number on it, 75% of it is just simple salience. Yeah.
Salience.
So reputation's not there. Do you know what I mean? You've got to hand it to Ehrenberg Bass, who I believe have done this. They haven't just brought things back. That's not something we ever thought about before, right? Coming to mind in buying situations, not just brand awareness, but the presence of salience is the main thing in B2B, right? If you look at the data, whichever brand comes to mind with the 95% out of the market, 70 to 80% of the time, that's the brand they're going to buy when they're in the 5% of the market, right? Why is that? Because without salience, the rest of it, reputation and everything, associations don't matter.
Doesn't matter.
And also because companies are lazy, like humans. Once it comes to mind, the company's going, fuck, we know IBM. Here are all the reasons why we should buy IBM. Now, we might throw some other options up there, but the reality is we're already zooming in on that preference. Salience is reputation in the sense that it starts driving it pretty quickly. So, for me, reputation's an interesting blind path. You know what I mean? The other little area with reputation, which is problematic, is trust doesn't matter at all. Yeah? Fuck, if I get tired of this, emphasis on trust, it's completely wrong. Again, it's a blind alleyway, right? You don't need to trust a brand for the brand to be strong or for you to purchase it. If you look at the Reader's Digest list of the world's least trusted brands, complete with Meta and Amazon and the rest of them, you see the world's most successful companies and brands. Do you know what I mean? There's this belief that we need this anthropomorphic trust, like we're marrying a brand. It's not the same. Do you know what I mean? Reputation is a human concept. Trust is a human concept, and they're misapplied when we get to corporate things. You don't need to trust your toothpaste brand. It would seem logical, but it breaks down in the data. Do you know what I mean?
Fair enough. You're more likely to. So if we take B2B, for example, though, so if we eradicate B2C from this particular part of the conversation.
Yeah.
B2B marketers, B2B salespeople, salience, yes. But if you're not in a luxurious position to have that salience,
yes,
which is as quoted by you, if you, I'm ad-libbing here, forgive me, but unless you've got the time and the money, salience is pretty difficult to get.
Yeah, you want to get it, but you don't have it to begin with. Yeah, for sure.
You don't have it to begin with, right? So you've got time, but you won't always necessarily have the amount of money over and above your competitors in that regard to build that salience over and above them. So what are we working with if we don't have salience, and if trust and reputation doesn't come into it? What is left? Ultimately go away to die?
No. What's left is relative differentiation. So the data from Kantar is pretty clear. There's these two words we talk about, right? Distinctiveness and differentiation. Distinctiveness relating more to salience and coming to mind. Differentiation relating to how you're perceived vis-a-vis the competition. It's clear from the data that in the early days of a brand's history, B2B or B2C, a brand leans more on differentiation than distinctiveness. Later on, when it gets bigger and mature, distinctiveness becomes its main crutch, not exclusively, but it moves across to that. But in the beginning, there is only differentiation. Now, that's problematic because the literature on differentiation is wrong. Michael Porter was wrong. Everyone thinks differentiation is unique. Those two words are not the same. Michael Porter is incorrect here, and so is everyone that followed him. It's not about finding uniqueness. It never was. It was finding relative difference versus the alternatives that you put yourself up against. And that's a much more achievable mission in two senses, right? First, because you can define your smaller market, your niche market that you want to play in as a smaller brand. And second, by doing that, you can find the two or three things the big boys don't focus on, don't emphasize, and you can relatively be stronger than them. And when I say relative, what I mean is you may not be faster than them, but you can communicate your fastness more frequently, more consistently to this niche market to the degree that they begin to get it, right? I mean, or find a genuine relative difference. That's what brands are built from in that beginning, not trust and not reputation, but the fact that, this brand does this and this relatively better than the others. I like this brand, right? That's how it begins. And with that comes scale, and with it comes funds, and with it comes salience, and then we get bigger. But absolutely, differentiation, if you haven't got billions from the start, has to be at the core of how you play the game. When we launched Mini MBA, that's what I'm saying earlier, it was all about taking an enemy and going, we can give you the MBA level, the confidence, the applied skills, but Mini, they're 100 grand, we're 2 grand. They visit a business school. You can do this and fit it into your life, right? That was the difference that we pushed at the beginning.
Mark, quick question on the back of that. Do you think differentiation is going to become more and more difficult, or that unique, relative uniqueness? And the reason when you say this, I think of some of the work that, and I don't know what your thoughts are on Nicholas Taleb. I don't know if you come across
Black
him.
Swan guy. Yeah,
he talks about mediocreistan and extremistan, and the idea behind it is certain environments will get you to extremistan, and he talks about actors, for example, and you don't know anybody, but you know the top 2 or 3 or whatever it is, and but your accountant is in mediocreistan, right, where it's a linear kind of growth, and there's no extremes in that situation. And this was something that I was thinking about, of like whether this relative uniqueness is becoming harder and harder to do as some of these industries become harder and harder. They become more accessible to a larger pool of people. Like your Mini MBA. Now it's very hard to go and sell a Mini MBA program because people are not looking at, hey, there's Mark Ritson here and I don't know, Scott Galloway in New York. And no. Now it's a lot more accessible, and therefore all the little guys just drop, and that doesn't. No. So my question is, do you think it's becoming harder and harder to do that?
It is in a category, Shahin, like you just described, but that's the history of categories. So what happens next is subcategories emerge that allow someone to play in a slightly different room from us. So you suddenly get a mini PhD. I'm making that up, right? I mean, if you look at, David Arca's work in this area, he's spent, he's the biggest thinker in branding we've had in the last 100 years. And Arca's work, really, he's focused most of it for the last 20 years on subcategories for this reason, right? His point is the yogurt category is now so dominated and so nichified by the big players. What can you do? And Arca's point is You find a little corner of the category, you push against the wall, you create a new room, you call it Greek yogurt, and Chobani goes, right, fuck yogurt, we're Greek yogurt, and we're going to own this. And we're going to make this room bigger than the yogurt room where we can own the furniture, right? So there is a play there. So what you're describing, I think, is true, but it's been happening since the history of capitalism, right? This is how categories grow and move and evolve. And the challenge of relative differentiation is realizing, how can we take a little slice of it that may become bigger over time? But my key point on that is, no uniqueness at all, and maybe not even any actual differentiation at all. It's the fact that, is Kit Kat actually the best brand for a break? Well, it is, because it comes up when you think of having a break with a cup of coffee. Is that really true? No, it's just that they've spent 30 years and $25 billion saying that same thing over and over again and not saying anything else. You see what I mean? That's relative differentiation. So for me, it's about making choices and not deviating from them in the category you're in or the subcategory. And that's the play. And back to Vinny's point, having built it on differentiation, you start to mature, you start to get some scale, you start to spend bigger, and salience and coming to mind and being one of the bigger players hopefully is the next step.
A product is made in a factory, a brand is made in the mind. Who said that?
Stephen King, 1972.
Yeah. That fits very nicely here. To your point around salience, I can't get off it. Salience, the definition of salience is notoriety, prominence.
Coming to mind in buying situations, yeah?
Coming to mind in buying situations.
The twist in it, which is not very easily revealed by Ehrenberg Bass, at least my interpretation of it is, it means two things, right? It means I've already preloaded you with the category entry point, right? When you want to improve your marketing skills, Mini MBA comes up. But also more for B2C brands, but not only. If I'm in the supermarket looking at take-home, noodle dishes, the Sharwood's noodles look like Sharwood's noodles and instantly stand out because I recognize them and connect them back to what Sharwood stands for. They're the two elements, right? So the use of distinctive brand assets to look like yourself and be very clear, dairy milk, etc. But the main one in B2B is that when you think the top 2 or 3 category entry points, our brand is the one that you think of, right? That when you think of CRM systems, Salesforce is the first brand that comes to mind, yeah?
Where I want to take this question, and I'm wary of time, but where I want to take this question is, okay, so we've got branding and B2B marketing. Does it get the lavish budgets that B2C marketing gets? Depends who you ask, but not a lot of brand work is done from a B2B perspective as much as B2C. It's almost like the ugly cousin of B2C. B2B marketing is the ugly cousin of B2C marketing. And that comes down to, decisions that are made, not as much budget can be invested. So we're already at a loss in the B2B world when it comes to trying to get started, irrespective of the size of your organization. If you're a B2B startup, you are fucked, right? You haven't got any money. You've just got nothing but time, right? And where are we going with that? So the line of work that I'm in, and something that I advocate massively for, bearing in mind I've spent the last 20 years across B2C and B2B, the last decade and more in B2B. And the area of interest for me currently at the moment, and has been for the last 7 years, has been organic professional branding. And professional branding, just so we're clear, is personal branding of professionals organically. You can put money behind that. Think, paid media behind individuals' social media posts on LinkedIn, let's call it, right? But if you take the same thinking of, salience, prominence, notoriety, right? And you square off a bit of budget for the company brand itself, but then you think about B2B sales teams, and you think about investing into their professional brands or personal brands, but from a professional standpoint, where does that sit on your radar of bullshit versus, it could actually be a good thing?
I think it's important because at the end, if we take LinkedIn as the example, or any social media, the clue is in the title, right? There's never been any interest in what Salesforce says about anything on any topic, on any social media channel. Who gives a fuck, right? Who gives a fuck about any of it, right? The only time you can break through in those channels is, as the name suggests, when individuals communicate via the medium, right? And so one very important angle, I think, to this sort of prioritization of executive personal brands is that that's the only way you're going to be. I mean, Mini MBA, again, is a good example, right? I mean, I'll be honest with you. I have a good marketing team who I respect and let do their thing a lot of the time. I'm actively against them having the Mini MBA voice on LinkedIn. It just feels shit to me. You know, I respect them trying it. It gets, 1 like and 2 follows and all that stuff. Because who's listening to a disembodied voice from a training program? Do you know what I mean? And I get 500,000 views for a good post, right? So the point is,
Mark Ritson gets 500,000 views.
Yeah, from me. And then it's interesting. LinkedIn recently were asking me if I wanted to be, what do they call it? The approved
top
voice. Yeah, top voice. And I said, yeah, sure, if you want me to do it. And they said, well, who manages your LinkedIn posts? And I'm like, me. That's why they're successful. I haven't gone some cretin, in a windowless room writing stuff for me. Do you know what I mean? It's me at 4:00 in the morning in my underpants in bed going, I'm fucking here, I'm fucking there. And it's human, right? So I think that does speak to your point, right? That the reason we want empowered executive voices is because that's how you build B2B brands on social media, not in other channels. But, Jeff Bezos built Amazon. It's always very interesting. If you look at these brands in their early stages, the founder was far more interesting than the brand. And the founder, if you look at the clever ones like Bezos, were always playing a game. They were representing the brand and not necessarily themselves all along, right? So they were playing a very specific game, while masquerading as being, this is Jeff Bezos. But really, when he was on Letterman and stuff, what he was really doing is going, Amazon is new, Amazon is advanced, Amazon's changing things, and I think that's a very interesting dance that you can make,
The last thing that I want to ask on this is, another quote from one of your lectures: brand minus commodity equals brand equity. So if you take a brand and you pull out the commodity of the brand itself, what's left is your brand equity, right? Do you want to explain? Do you want to expand on that before I ask my question?
I think it's the central calculation, right? So if you take the simplest example, right? If you take Coca-Cola and you subtract cola from it, what's left? And that reveals everything that's important. So it reveals salience for the name Coca-Cola. It reveals brand associations that you have for Coke over and above the category. It also reveals employer branding, so a job working in beverages versus a job with Coca-Cola. It also is the basis for how we do financial valuation of intangible assets. We take out the generic sales we would have got anyway, and we look at what the brand is generating in dollar terms over a net present value. So for me, yeah, that's it. I mean, at the end of the day, what have we got? When you take marketing professor out of Mark Ritson minus marketing professor equals what? And that's, therein lies the calculation. And often the answer is we haven't got anything. Very often you discover that the answer can be negative because you can have negative associations as well as positive. And very often, most often, the things that you discover when you make that calculation are not what the company that owns the brand thought they would be. Yeah, it's completely different. It's not, for example, ever trust, purpose, fighting for consumer value and all the other horseshit that we get in brand positioning charts. It's something very different, and it's the truth,
So you sort of edged into it there. Can that same formula be used on personal/professional branding when it comes to social selling?
Absolutely. And in fact, if you look at, I knew a long time ago, I nearly bought Kylie Minogue's house. That's a different story, but on French Island. But if you look at Kylie doesn't exist in the real world. Everyone she knows, including people trying to buy the house off her, refer to her as Min, right? Kylie is something she has created, and Kylie minus Min is the brand that she is projecting at any one time. And it's remarkable, if you look into it, how many of these celebrities who are smart, and Min's smart, how many of them protect their sanity by ensuring the brand is not them, right? And there's this person over here that does all this shit, and then there's the normal person. Do you know what I mean? So I think, yeah, absolutely, it works beautifully.
So can B2B marketers then, sorry, last question on this and then we'll wrap, but can B2B marketers then see a path to empower their salespeople who are already using LinkedIn to send out connection requests and send DMs and pitch slap and blah, 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 but empower them to start creating content, but thinking about creating a multitude of Kylie Minogues?
No, because most of them are so fucking boring and anodyne. They're of no interest to anyone ever. So the game
what would
is
you recommend?
Well, not that, right? Because if we, it's not fair, right? And it's like the analogy of, good looks, right? It's just some people, and clearly I'm not one of them, don't get me wrong, but some people can just turn up and put on a fucking $12 Gap shirt and look fantastic, right? In the same way, in the world of personal branding, even when you give them the empowerment, the tools, the training, the knowledge, they're just too fucking boring to have anything interesting to say. Do you know what I mean? And another one, to keep saying it for longer than, 3 weeks. I must get every year about 10 people want to become a marketing columnist, right? And they always write to me and say, how do you become a marketing columnist, blah, blah, blah. And I'm like, just start writing, you know what I mean? And they're like, but what, how do I said, just do it for 20 years. You'll get better at it. But you got to do it for 20 fucking years. I've been writing a marketing column for 25 years. And I am happy to admit that initially they were all shit. Some of them still are, right? But to begin with, the first 5 years, they were all shit, right? So, it's keep doing it so that you begin to evolve a voice. And even then, 99 times out of 100, there's no voice to evolve. Do you know what I mean? You can dress someone up in expensive clothes. They still look like shit if they don't have the gift of, hot looks. And I'm afraid it's the same thing. You can't train someone to be interesting or have a point of view. And LinkedIn is a scrollable evidence base of why most people are really fucking boring and really need to stop saying the same thing over and over again. You know what I mean? It's like, fuck, Yeah, we know
unfiltered,
that.
Unfiltered feedback. I love that.
It's true, though, right? I mean, like when you all scroll through LinkedIn, most of it is dross, and well-meaning dross, but people that all want to be fucking opinion leaders, but don't have an opinion and aren't leaders. I mean, fuck, it's not going to work. You can't bluff. You know what I mean? You can't pretend. I mean, say what you like about Simon Sinek. I mean, he just writes Christmas card logic all day long, in my opinion. But fuck, he's good at it, and he's been doing it a long time. And if you're in the market for hokey, fake, emotional horseshit, he's a master at it, right?
Relative differentiation.
Who has more hokey bullshit than anyone else?
I'm trying to be diplomatic, Mark.
And I'm being nice. That's a fucking compliment, right?
All right.
You know what I do? You know what I do with all of his posts that I get on LinkedIn? Every time I just write into the bottom of them, Merry Christmas. I've been doing that for 10 years. Whatever he says, leaders care. Good leaders care. Bad leaders hate. And I write underneath, Merry Christmas. Right?
Yeah. I gotta keep an eye out for this. Man. That's so good.
With your responses, comments, sometimes you're able to get into the comments of something that you've posted or someone else has posted about you. Sometimes they're positive responses. Sometimes you don't mind unleashing a little bit where someone's pissed you off.
Yeah.
Do you understand that with the rough comes with the smooth? You know that your personal brand is you being completely authentic. So your true authentic self, breaking the rules to be true to yourself, you have to bring the rough with the smooth in all instances. Otherwise you're being disingenuous.
Yeah, I mean, I wouldn't know any. That's a great explanation, and it's true, I'm sure. But I'm not explicitly having that thought. What I'm thinking is, what the fuck is that comment meant to be? That's wrong. Tap, 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 tap. I regard, my LinkedIn feed is my back garden. If someone wants to come into my back garden because the gate is open and take a piss on one of my trees, absolutely, that's the rule of the game. But I'm going to come over and hit you on the back of the head with a rake if you don't piss in the right place. Do you know what I mean? And by the same token,
there's a place to piss as well. I love
there's
it.
a place to piss and piss in the right way, right? But I do like it when someone gives me a bunch of shit and they make a good point. I mean, that's I like that very much. At the same time, when someone else posts on a public forum, the big problem I've got now is when I occasionally post, that's, someone famously posted the new 4Ps, and it was just, and I said, look, and I tried to be nice about it. I said, look, you need to understand the original work before you start doing this, because it's embarrassing, right? And I got all these people saying, you're bullying and you're punching down. And I'm like, well, what else do you want? I mean, I'm sorry, I have 200,000 followers now. I mean,
You'd have been doing it if you had one follower, right?
Yeah, for a long time you could get away with that, and it was fine. And I'm not trying to bully anyone. I'm allowed a point like anyone else, right? But I'm not. I mean, I have to now. I am more censored in my responses, just because I'm aware that I might really upset someone, not because of what I'm saying, because I have more followers than many people. Which it just fucks me off, really, because I mean, it defeats the object. But and the other thing which really fucks me off now is if you look at the words that are attached to me, all of a sudden, it's only happened in the last couple of years, I'm now venerated, and he needs no introduction, and we all know that Mark, and it's like, okay, but I don't like it, because it's like it sort of freezes you in aspic, and you're now, you're kind of, we know what Mark is. Mark's this, and it's kind of, and it's said very lovingly, Mark's this iconic thing over here, and I'm like, go fuck yourself, though. You know what I mean? I'm still, I don't regard that as being true, but it's happened to me, and I can't do anything about it, for sure.
Hopefully we didn't do too much of that at the beginning.
No, but I think it's endemic, Shahin, honestly. And it's not like I'm not upset about it. You know what I mean? I'm not precious about it. It's just I've been interested watching myself become positioned as a certain thing. You know what I mean? Which is, look, there's worse things, right? There's worse things, man.
Mark, we started this conversation with kind of your journey moving from academia to Mini MBA. One last question that I want to ask you is, with your background in marketing, you obviously you've done a lot in that space. And this question is when you switch to kind of running your own business, what has been some of the things that have surprised you after you've made that transition? And it could be even in marketing that has surprised you in this few years journey.
It's, I guess the biggest surprise has just been the general challenges of growth. We've been growing at about 20% CAGR, which is not crazy by some small business standards, but we've done it consistently for 8-9 years now, right? But even that level of relatively manageable growth causes innumerable problems across the team, the structure, the leadership, the budgets. That's probably the big one. That growth, the thing everybody wants, is problematic from a management point of view. And it's never as good as when there's 3 of you. I started out with a woman called Jo, who was my partner in this, working at Centaur. And I remember Jo giving out leaflets and stuff at a conference. And me thinking, well, that's my partner there working her ass off. Good on her, and it was me and her and stuff at the start. And I think in some ways it's never better than that, right? And then growth comes and it becomes, I've got a great MD now, Tim. And Tim's main job, I'm afraid to say, and God knows I couldn't survive without him, is managing all the problems of growth, not all the, the joys and triumph. There's no time in capitalism to celebrate, we've broken 20 million, whatever, right? That doesn't happen, because what you're worried about are the problems that 20 million, leaves with the business. You know what I mean? So I think that's the big surprise. Growth is really the enemy of happiness. It really is. And yet everybody wants it, right? Everyone aims for it. Everyone wants more of it next year and increasing it. And for good reason, but it creates problems that are intractable to some degree,
Growth is the enemy of happiness. Let's end on that note. I mean, that's such a strong statement. But Mark, just want to say thank you so much for coming on the podcast. Really enjoyed this conversation.
My pleasure, boys. That was fun. That was a lot of fun, and I'll look forward to listening to it.
Today's episode of Growth Colony was produced by Liza Maywald and Alexander Hipwell. It was edited by Dave Simido, with additional editing by Liza Maywald and music arrangement by Liza and Alexander. Special thanks to Tina Wabe. We couldn't make this show without you. This episode was hosted by Shahin Hoda and Vinnie Romano. If you enjoyed the podcast, please subscribe and give us a rating on Spotify or Apple Podcasts. If you'd like to know more about Growth Colony, check out our newsletter and subscribe with the link in the pod description. Do you think you'd be a great guest or just interested in a chat? send through an email at podcast@xgrowth.com.au. That's podcast@xgrowth.com.au. Or fill out the form in the description. That's all for now. We'll catch you next week right here on Growth Colony.